Learn English through Stories E49 PDF. Adapted and modified by Kulwant Singh Sandhu. Contents 1. The Eyes of the Eagle. 2. Grammar page. 1. The Eyes of the Eagle. It was a high, piercing sound, almost like the yelping of a dog. Jai stopped picking the wild strawberries that grew in the grass around him and looked up at the sky. He had a dog, a shaggy guard dog called Matu, but Matu did not yet yelp. He growled and barked. The strange sound came from the sky, and Jai had heard it before. Now, realizing what it was, he jumped to his feet, calling to his dog, calling his sheep to start for home. Matu came bounding towards him, ready for a game. "Not now, Matu," said Jai. "We must get the lambs home quickly." Again he looked up at the sky. He saw it now, a black speck against the sun, growing larger as it circled the mountain, coming lower every moment. A golden eagle, king of the skies over the higher Himalayas, ready now to swoop and seize its prey. Had it seen a pheasant or a pine marten? Or was it after one of the lambs? Jai had never lost a lamb to an eagle, but recently some of the other shepherds had been talking about a golden eagle that had been preying on their flocks. The sheep had wandered some way down the side of the mountain, and Jai ran after them to make sure that none of the lambs had gone off on its own. Matu ran about, barking furiously. He wasn't very good at keeping the sheep together. He was often bumping into them and sending them tumbling down the slope, but his size and bear-like look kept the leopards and wolves at a distance. Jai was counting the lambs. They were bleating loudly and staying close to their mothers. 1, 2, 3, 4. There should have been a fifth. Jai couldn't see it on the slope below him. He looked up towards a rocky ledge near the steep path to the Tun temple. The golden eagle was circling the rocks. The bird disappeared from sight for a moment, then rose again with a small creature grasped firmly in its terrible talons. "It has taken a lamb!" shouted Jai. He started scrambling up the slope. Matu ran ahead of him, barking furiously at the big bird as it glided away over the tops of the stunted junipers to its eyrie on the cliffs above Tun. There was nothing that Jai and Matu could do except stare helplessly and angrily at the disappearing eagle. The lamb had died the instant it had been struck. The rest of the flock seemed unaware of what had happened. They still grazed on the thick, sweet grass of the mountain slopes. "We had better drive them home, Matu," said Jai, and at a nod from the boy, the big dog bounded down the slope to take part in his favorite game of driving the sheep homewards. Soon he had them running all over the place, and Jai had to dash about trying to keep them together. Finally, they straggled homewards. "A fine lamb gone," said Jai to himself gloomily. "I wonder what grandfather will say." Grandfather said, "Never mind, it had to happen someday. That eagle has been watching the sheep for some time." Grandmother, more practical, said, "We could have sold the lamb for 300 rupees. You'll have to be more careful in future, Jai. Don't fall asleep on the hillside, and don't read storybooks when you are supposed to be watching the sheep." "I wasn't reading this morning," said Jai truthfully, forgetting to mention that he had been gathering strawberries. "It's good for him to read," said Grandfather, who had never had the luck to go to school. In his days, there weren't any schools in the mountains. Now there was one in every village. "Time enough to read at night," said Grandmother, who did not think much of the little one-room school down at Makhu, their home village. "Well, these are the October holidays," said Grandfather. "Otherwise he would not be here to help us with the sheep. It will snow by the end of the month, and then we will move with the flock. You will have more time for reading then, Jai." At Makhu, which was down in the warmer valley, Jai's parents tilled a few narrow terraces on which they grew barley, millets, and potatoes. The old people brought their sheep up to the Tun meadows to graze during the summer months. They stayed in a small stone hut just off the path which pilgrims took to the ancient temple. At 12,000 feet above sea level, It was the highest Hindu temple on the inner Himalayan ranges. The following day Jai and Matu were very careful. They did not let the sheep out of sight even for a minute. Nor did they catch sight of the golden eagle. What if it attacks again, wondered Jai. How will I stop it? The great eagle, with its powerful beak and talons, was more than a match for boy or dog. Its hind claw, 4 inches round the curve, was its most dangerous weapon. When it spread its wings, the distance from tip to tip was more than 8 feet. The eagle did not come that day, because it had fed well and was now resting in its eyrie. Old bones, which had belonged to pheasants, snowcocks, pine martens, and even foxes, were scattered about the rocks which formed the eagle's home. The eagle had a mate, but it was not the breeding season, and she was away on a scouting expedition of her own. The golden eagle stood on its rocky ledge, staring majestically across the valley. Its hard, unblinking eyes missed nothing. Those strange orange-yellow eyes could spot a field rat, or a mouse, or a hare more than 100 yards below. There were other eagles on the mountain, but usually they kept to their own territory. And only the bolder ones went for lambs, because the flocks were always protected by men and dogs. The eagle took off from its eyrie and glided gracefully, powerfully over the valley, circling the Tongue Mountain. Below lay the old temple, built from slabs of gray granite. A line of pilgrims snaked up the steep, narrow path. On the meadows below the peak, the sheep grazed peacefully, unaware of the presence of the eagle. The great bird's shadow slid over the sunlit slopes. The eagle saw the boy and the dog, but he did not fear them. He had his eye on a lamb that was frisking about on the grass, a few feet away from the other grazing sheep. Jai did not see the eagle until it swept round an outcrop of rocks about 100 feet away. It moved silently, without any movement of its wings, for it had already built up the momentum for its dive. Now it came straight at the lamb. Matu saw the bird in time. With a low growl he dashed forward and reached the side of the lamb at almost the same instant that the eagle swept in. There was a terrific collision. Feathers flew. The eagle screamed with rage. The lamb tumbled down the slope, and Matu howled in pain as the huge beak struck him high on the leg. The big bird, a little stunned by the clash, flew off rather unsteadily, with a mighty beating of its wings. Matu had saved the lamb. It was frightened but unhurt. Bleating loudly, it joined the other sheep, who took up the bleating. Jai ran up to Matu, who lay whimpering on the ground. There was no sign of the eagle. Quickly he removed his shirt and vest, then he wrapped his vest round the dog's wound, tying it in position with his belt. Matu could not get up, and he was much too heavy for Jai to carry. Jai did not want to leave his dog alone, in case the eagle returned to attack. He stood up, cupped his hand to his mouth, and began calling for his grandfather. "Dada, Dada," he shouted, and presently grandfather heard him and came stumbling down the slope. He was followed by another shepherd, and together they lifted Matu and carried him home. Matu had a bad wound, but grandmother cleaned it and applied a paste made of herbs. Then she laid strips of carrot over the wound, an old mountain remedy, and bandaged the leg. But it would be some time before Matu could run about again. By then it would probably be snowing and time to leave these high-altitude pastures and return to the valley. Meanwhile, the sheep had to be taken out to graze, and grandfather decided to accompany Jai for the remaining period. They did not see the golden eagle for 2 or 3 days, and when they did, it was flying over the next range. Perhaps it had found some other source of food, or even another flock of sheep. "Are you afraid of the eagle?" grandfather asked Jai. "I wasn't before," said Jai. "Not until it hurt Matu. I did not know it could be so dangerous, but Matu hurt it too. He banged straight into it." "Perhaps it won't bother us again," said grandfather thoughtfully. "A bird's wing is easily injured, even an eagle's." Jai wasn't so sure. He had seen it strike twice, and he knew that it was not afraid of anyone. Only when it learned to fear his presence would it keep away from the flock. The next day grandfather did not feel well. He was feverish and kept to his bed. Matu was hobbling about gamely on 3 legs. The wounded leg was still very sore. "Don't go too far with the sheep," said grandmother. "Let them graze near the house." "But there's hardly any grass here," said Jai. "I don't want you wandering off while that eagle is still around." "Give him my stick," said grandfather from his bed. Grandmother took it from the corner and handed it to the boy. It was an old stick, made of wild cherry wood, which grandfather often carried around. The wood was strong and well seasoned. The stick was stout and long. It reached up to Jai's shoulders. "Don't lose it," said grandfather. "It was given to me many years ago by a wandering scholar who came to the Tun Temple. I was going to give it to you when you got bigger, but perhaps this is the right time for you to have it. If the eagle comes near you, swing the stick around your head. That should frighten it off." Clouds had gathered over the mountains, and a heavy mist hid the Tun Temple. With the approach of winter, the flow of pilgrims had been reduced to a trickle. The shepherds had started leaving the lush meadows and returning to their villages at lower altitudes. Very soon, the bears and the leopards and the golden eagles would have the high ranges all to themselves. Jai used the cherry wood stick to prod the sheep along the path until they reached the steep meadows. The stick would have to be a substitute for Matu, and they seemed to respond to it more readily than they did to Matu's mad charges. Because of the sudden cold and the prospect of snow, grandmother had made Jai wear a rough woolen jacket and a pair of high boots bought from a Tibetan trader. He wasn't used to the boots. He wore sandals at other times, and had some difficulty in climbing quickly up and down the hillside. It was tiring work trying to keep the flock together. The cawing of some crows warned Jai that the eagle might be around, but the mist prevented him from seeing very far. After some time the mist lifted, and Jai was able to see the temple and the snow peaks towering behind it. He saw the golden eagle too. It was circling high overhead. Jai kept close to the flock, one eye on the eagle, one eye on the restless sheep. Then the great bird stooped and flew lower. It circled the temple and then pretended to go away. Jai felt sure it would be back, and a few minutes later it reappeared from the other side of the mountain. It was much lower now, wings spread out and back, tail on feet to the fore, piercing eyes fixed on its target, a small lamb that had suddenly gone frisking down the slope, away from Jai and the flock. Now it flew lower still, only a few feet off the ground, paying no attention to the boy. It passed Jai with a great rush of air, and as it did so, the boy struck out with his stick and caught the bird a glancing blow. The eagle missed its prey, and the tiny lamb skipped away. To Jai's amazement, the bird did not fly off. Instead, it landed on the hillside and glared at the boy, as a king would glare at a humble subject who had dared to pelt him with a pebble. The golden eagle stood almost as tall as Jai. Its wings were still outspread. Its fierce eyes seemed to be looking through and through the boy. Jai's first instinct was to turn and run. But the cherry wood stick was still in his hands, and he felt sure there was power in it. He saw that the eagle was about to launch itself again at the lamb. Instead of running away, he ran forward, the stick raised above his head. The eagle rose a few feet off the ground and struck out with its huge claws. Luckily for Jai, his heavy jacket took the force of the blow. A talon ripped through the sleeve and the sleeve fell away. At the same time, the heavy stick caught the eagle across its open wing. The bird gave a shrill cry of pain and fury. Then it turned and flapped heavily away, flying unsteadily because of its injured wing. Jai still clutched the stick because he expected the bird to return. He did not even glance at his torn jacket. But the golden eagle had alighted on a distant rock and was in no hurry to return to the attack. Jai began driving the sheep home. The clouds had become heavy and black, and presently the first snowflakes began to fall. Jai saw a hare go lolloping down the hill. When it was about 50 yards away, there was a rush of air from the eagle's beating wings, and Jai saw the bird approaching the hare in a sidelong drive. So it hasn't been badly hurt, thought Jai, feeling a little relieved, for he could not help admiring the great bird. Now it has found something else to chase for its dinner. The hare saw the eagle and dodged about, making for a clump of junipers. Jai did not know if it was caught or not, because the snow and sleet had increased, and both bird and hare were lost in the gathering snowstorm. The sheep were bleating behind him. One of the lambs looked tired, and he stooped to pick it up. As he did so, he heard a thin, whining sound. It grew louder by the second. Before he could look up, a huge wing caught him across the shoulders and sent him sprawling. The lamb tumbled down the slope with him into a thorny bilberry bush. The bush saved them. Jai saw the eagle coming in again, flying low. It was another eagle. One had been vanquished, and now here was another, just as big and fearless, probably the mate of the first eagle. Jai had lost his stick, and there was no way by which he could fight the second eagle. So he crept further into the bush, holding the lamb beneath him. At the same time he began shouting at the top of his voice, both to scare the bird away and to summon help. The eagle could not easily get at them now, but the rest of the flock was exposed on the hillside. Surely the eagle would make for them. Even as the bird circled and came back in another dive, Jai heard fierce barking. The eagle immediately swung away and rose skywards. The barking came from Matu. Hearing Jai's shouts and sensing that something was wrong, he had come limping out of the house, ready to do battle. Behind him came another shepherd and, most wonderful of all, grandmother herself, banging 2 frying pans together. The barking, the banging, and the shouting frightened the eagles away. The sheep scattered too, and it was some time before they could all be rounded up. By then it was snowing heavily. "Tomorrow we must all go down to Maku," said the shepherd. "Yes, it's time we went," said grandmother. "You can read your storybooks again, Jai." "I'll have my own story to tell," said Jai. When they reached the hut and Jai saw grandfather, he said, "Oh, I've forgotten your stick." But Matu had picked it up. Carrying it between his teeth, he brought it home and sat down with it in the open doorway. He had decided the cherry wood was good for his teeth and would have chewed it up if grandmother hadn't taken it from him. "Never mind," said grandfather, sitting up on his cot. "It isn't the stick that matters, it's the person who holds it." 2. Grammar page.